Was that a great debate last night, or what? I heard y'all had a surprise visitor this morning. I hope he wasn't too worn out, but he did a great job. I know he had to head out east to continue the campaign fight. You know, I've given many speeches this year about how important this election is. Indeed, I have said it may be the most important election of our adult lifetimes. This election comes down to whether we want more government versus less government. It's about whether we want more federal spending versus less spending. It's whether we want more debt or less debt. It's whether we want to embrace the European model or do we want to pursue an American model that preserves the American dream for our children and our grandchildren. It's whether we go down this road of embracing class warfare where we demonize the successful, separating one class, one group against another, or whether we continue to believe that in America we promise equal opportunity, not equal outcomes. And I could certainly go on and on about what this election is about, but as we enter this final stretch, I think it's very important to take a look at what the president's actually been doing, to see how it stacks up against what he actually said he would do. 4 years ago, he could run on hope and change, and now he's actually got a record. And you know, even though I disagree with them, when you do confront those honest liberals that have the courage of their convictions, at least they tell you what they think and that they follow through on their beliefs. And there's actually something to be said for being a man of your word, for saying what you mean, for doing what you say you're going to do when you're running for office. Now, you may recall that President Obama ran a masterful campaign 4 years ago. Again, he campaigned on to be a hopeful moderate who's going to change the tone of Washington, D.C. He literally ran as the anti-politician. Here we are 4 short years later. There is no more political person than President Obama. And let me give you 10 quick examples of what I'm talking about. You know, this president said that he supports pay-as-you-go budgeting, but more debt was created during his administration than any previous administration in our country's history. This president mocked the Bush tax cuts, saying that they were reflecting a tired and cynical philosophy. That was actually until he actually acted to extend those same Bush tax cuts. This president says he's for energy independence in America, but then he blocks the Keystone Pipeline. He limits offshore drilling in my state. He tries to put the coal industry out of business. And right here in Colorado and elsewhere, he withdraws oil and gas leases on public lands. This president condemns earmarks, but then he signed a bill with thousands of earmarks in them. This president said he was going to close Gitmo, but then he actually kept it open. This president attacked John McCain for proposing a tax on Cadillac health insurance plans, and then he passed a bill that included that same tax. This president attacked then Senator Hillary Clinton for proposing to mandate health insurance, but then he passed a law that included that same mandate. This president that said that lobbyists wouldn't find a job in his White House, but then they did. This president attacks Republicans as elitists, but he's a Harvard lawyer who's probably played more golf as president than Phil Mickelson has in these last 4 years. This president attacks Republicans for proposing cuts in Medicare, and yet he has now cut over $700 billion in Medicare to pay for his own new government program. These are just 10 examples of this president saying one thing and doing just the opposite. I could certainly provide many more examples, but I think you get the point by now. You know, to be clear, you may agree with some of those positions, you may disagree with what he says or what he does, but we can't agree about this. There's no correlation between what the president says and what this president actually does. It's my way of thinking, that's a problem. That's a pretty fundamental problem. At a bare minimum, we should have the confidence that our president, whether you like him or not, whether you agree with him or not, actually will be a man of his word. And maybe we're also cynical, you just say, well, that's just politics. They all just say one thing and do another. It is, but it's not presidential. The bottom line is that President Obama is doing the exact opposite of not only what we're doing in Louisiana, but what other conservative governors are doing across this great country of ours. And I want to talk to you a little bit about those reforms. And I want to tell you, conservative principles actually work. And those are the principles we need to see applied in Washington, D.C. You see, every governor and any president will face one fundamental question when faced with these kinds of tough economic times. And that question is this: do you make the tough decisions in government, or do you shift those tough decisions to the people, the families, and businesses already struggling to pay their bills? When I was elected in Louisiana, I made a commitment to the people of Louisiana that we were going to change our state. For 25 years, we were the only state in the South where more people had left our state rather than moving into Louisiana. I said, we have got to change that so our sons and daughters come home to pursue the American dream. Now, we started by saying this. We had a special session on ethics. Now, why did we start there? Well, let's be honest. That's right. It's Louisiana. Let's be honest. We've had our history of colorful characters. We had 3 insurance commissioners in a row that went to federal prison. One of my predecessors was in federal prison when I took my oath of office. We had a congressman who was caught with $90,000 in his freezer, given a new definition of cold cash in Washington, D.C. And the list goes on and on. Everybody had their favorite joke about Louisiana. The problem is the jokes weren't funny anymore. LSU did a survey. They said the #1, tied for first place, #1 thing we could do to attract investment, create jobs, was to crack down on corruption. As long as who you know is more important than what you know, people did not want to invest in our state. We had a special session on ethics, passing the country's toughest ethics laws. As an example, went from 44th worst, according to the Center for Public Integrity for Legislative Disclosure, to #1 in the entire country. Thanks to those laws. Stop there. We had a second special session to get rid of some taxes. Taxes on businesses when they borrow money, when they buy new equipment, when they expand. Later that year, we signed the largest income tax cut in our state's history. Now, why is this important? Remember, I told you every governor and every president faces one fundamental choice. I made a commitment to the people of Louisiana. It says, as long as I'm governor, we are not raising taxes on our people. We are going to make the tough choices in government rather than shifting that burden to our people. For me, it's pretty simple when it comes to taxes. I've got 2 basic thoughts on taxes. If you want to encourage an activity, don't tax it. If you want to discourage an activity, tax it. And then secondly, as long as I'm governor, we're not raising taxes, period. That's all you need to know about me and taxes. Now, we've made some tough choices. We've cut our state budget by 26%. We've actually cut the number of government positions, government jobs by 16,000. We've got fewer government employees we've had in over 25 years. Now, while America's credit rating was going down, our credit rating was actually improved 6 different times, our highest credit rating in 25 years as well. And you see other conservative Republican governors doing this all across this country because we know this. We cannot mortgage our children's future. We cannot tax, spend, borrow our way into prosperity. It's a lesson Washington, D.C. needs to learn from our state. We made other reforms as well. The bottom line is this. After 25 years of losing our kids, for the last 4 years in a row, for the first time in decades, we've had more people move into Louisiana rather than leave our state. Along with Texas, we're one of only 2 states in the South that has more jobs than before this national recession started. Indeed, every month during this recession, we've outperformed the southern and national economies. We've created tens of thousands of jobs, attracted tens of billions of dollars of capital investment despite the national recession. Indeed, under President